everyone, welcome to the first episode of The Rhythm Section, brought to you by the Mind Refinery. I'm your host, Kyle Bodens. This show is going to be about music, what's relevant, what's influential, where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. For this episode, we're going to pick up where the artist formerly known as the Mind Refinery Podcast left off and continue our deep dive into the creative world of Kanye West with a look at the influential 808's and Heartbreaks. As usual, please rate and subscribe our channel wherever you get your podcasts. Alright guys, for the second leg of our deep dive into the creative world of Kanye West, we have the incomparable Coburn Blair.
How you guys doing?
And we have Mind Refinery Creative, Andrew Lanza.
Hey.
Okay, guys. So when we left off, Kanye West had dropped Graduation, doing what only the greats can do, transcend their genre and affect the way we listen to pop music. He also accomplishes what some rappers have hinted at, which is combining the art form with stadium rock, and pop ethos, with that revolutionary glow in the dark tour. Moving forward, this would just be the beginning of his assault on the music industry. So what I would like to do is I'd like to start on where he is as we're moving into 808 and Heartbreaks, which is a massive, hugely influential record. So where is, Kanye West personally and professionally before he's getting into this? One of the big things that's kind of looming is the death of his mother.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely, I think, the biggest driving force as far as the inspiration for this album. Moving into 808's is definitely the passing of his mother. We were talking initially about how to structure the podcast. We were kind of initially even thinking structuring it like pre that event and like post that event. So there's probably I can't think of an event in his life that would be more influential, not only on 808's but like the albums that followed as well. Dude's in a dark place. He was engaged to be married. That was ending at the same time. So that pain really, I think, drove what 808's is.
Yeah, because his mother died in November of 2007, and his engagement broke off in April of 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those two driving forces, and I think also we have to remember he had reached a new level of fame. So I think with Kanye's not newfound fame, but I think having a new level coming off of Graduation, like a different type of fame compared to like the smaller kind of fame he had before, kind of being the number one pop star maybe in the world at that point, and also like the number one rap star, combined with like these two big personal losses. And also you got sprinkled in Kanye's ego and Kanye's drive and his creativity and his vision as well.
Yeah. So and also sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add to also not only all those things that you mentioned, but I'm sure the dude was dealing with some dependencies at the time. I'm not sure exactly what, but be it drugs, alcohol, but also just him being manic depressive and bipolar. All those things compounded is just this typhoon that kind of led to 808.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all this coming together, it's kind of come together as a perfect storm, especially for any artist. But I think an artist is thoughtful of him and he was kind of in tune to his emotions. It's interesting because there's this interview where he's talking about if we didn't move to LA and I didn't move my mother to LA, that she might still be here. I think it's kind of a direct reference to the fact that she died, getting plastic surgery. And I feel like that really affected the themes of fame that we're going to talk to, because as you guys were saying, he's achieving this new level of fame, and then almost there's this symbolic and metaphoric thing with his mom passing away doing plastic surgery, and it's like this weird continuation on musing on fame and superficiality and what it brings, because at this point he's like a dog chasing a car. It's like you're just going after it. It's like you don't know what to do when you actually catch it. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm famous. Everything I've ever wanted I've now achieved. I struggled for it. That brings a chip on your shoulder. That is understandable. So I feel like that really influences how he's going to move forward, especially when we consider thematic elements of 808's and Heartbreak and My Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Other acts, they would kind of fall into complacency with like what we kind of outlined for Kanye, where Kanye kind of takes all these kind of emotions and he like reinterprets them and gives us art and gives us like a kind of a raw insight into all of it.
Well, he gets to go on to the next level too, because he starts looking for more. Because we talked about how collaboration is such a big thing in his career, and then he starts working with Jeff Basker, and this is kind of the Jeff Basker era. He started as a backup keyboardist. He's a producer. He's a backup keyboardist on the Glow in the Dark tour, and Kanye makes him this musical director of what he's trying to accomplish, which really kind of you start to see, and this is why there's a direct line between jazz and hip hop, because there's this idea of the band leader and like the coordinator, and you start to get this almost like modern day Miles Davis thing where he's always looking for the next great group of people that he's going to collaborate and kind of help realize his vision. And the Jeff Basker is a huge part of this, as John Bryan was previously, and this collaboration, I think, it will define the next part of his career.
I almost would look at it like there's like a kind of passing of the torch, because I think John Bryan was involved in 808's or just at the beginning of it at least, because he gave Kanye the idea to use like the Roland 808 drum machine, and he I think was the one who kind of talked about like using the machine to express emotions, which kind of ultimately led to the title of the project. So I think there's almost like passing a baton from John Bryan and his kind of cinematic universe into Jeff Basker's maybe a bit more musical and a bit more experimental kind of soundscapes that he creates with Kanye. And I think there's also Mike Dean is also involved here, who's like a Houston legend who was with DJ Screw and
well, he's got the all-star team for this. This is
So I don't think Mike Dean's credited on it, but he talks about doing engineering, so he was there for the sessions in Hawaii when they went on to record 808. So I think there's like a transition.
Sorry about that. I almost feel like he did this. He just almost did this to come hang out. Because he goes to Hawaii. He's with them. They start vibing on music together, and he's kind of just doing as you said, the engineering, where he's kind of doing the fine tuning, and it's like there's that sonic perfection that Kanye West is. It's kind of a trademark. It makes sense that he brings in who he brings in. So what I'd like to move on to let's talk about the record 808's and Heartbreak. What were our initial reactions to this album when we heard it?
I think for me, I initially really liked it when I heard it. I know it definitely got like a lot of mixed reactions. I think Robocop, if I remember correctly, was the first record to leak, and I still have like a copy of it, like the leaked copy on my iTunes, probably at home somewhere. And it was a divisive record that I think a lot of people like didn't really understand where he was going. And although at the time like autotune was as big as it like was in hip hop and as pervasive in the music, I think the way Kanye was using it was closer to like electro synth and kind of electro pop than it was in the hip hop world that we'd kind of understood from Kanye before.
Yeah, I as I said before, like a lot of these albums I went back and listened to after becoming a fan. And it's funny, actually. I like when the album came out, obviously, again, like I was aware of it. I heard the singles, whatever. And like, everybody was kind of like, oh, it's too auto-tune, oh, blah, blah, Kanye West fell off, blah, blah. And it kind of like had this, I guess, kind of stigma, at least from what I perceived about it. And even at the time, I was dating a girl who was a pretty big Kanye fan, and even she was like, "Oh no, I hate 808s. I hate 808s." So when I went through the back catalog, I was almost not, I wouldn't say dreading listening to 808s, but it was kind of like, all right, I guess I'll listen to this one now. And right from the jump, I loved it. I was like instantly, I don't know, maybe it's like over the years, kind of the music soundscape, like the music environment just across the industry had changed enough that it was more kind of maybe less surprising, I guess. But yeah, from the jump, I fucking loved it. I was surprised at the honestly by the backlash to it. I think it was a natural progression. I think you see notes of it, like you see little pieces of it, like we talked about before in graduation. So I don't think it was like a super big surprise because I mean it is the next evolution, and the guy is always evolving and he's never stagnating. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just genuinely surprised that it like the album got so much hate when it came out because I think it's a genuinely great album. Like there's some really really good tracks on here, and there's not a lot of tracks that I would skip or whatever.
The reaction to these kind of things is weird because at this point he had a narrative that we looked at in in the first leg of this, and he transcends hip hop, and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm just going to chop this sound right down, and
Hmm.
only the very top tier of bands historically can get away with this doing well. Like you are looking at the Beatles multiple times, you're looking at Nirvana with In Utero, you're looking at U2 with Octoon Baby, you're looking at Radiohead with, and this is kind of how we have to talk to him now because trying to just judge him on a hip hop level I think is part of what, not to say that hip hop isn't one thing, but I don't think, but the thing with all these groups is you can't judge them just by his rock music as well. uh I think that trying to judge it as just a hip hop record is part of why it was judged the way it was. I know that,
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
right? So, like, if you're saying, well, what is this from a hip hop point of view? First of all, if he's just purely like, this the 808 was used huge on this. So, if the 808's getting used, this thing has got the hip hop DNA in it because hip hop was built on the 808. What we know is hip hop is like that is one of the. If you remove that piece of equipment, it sounds different. And I think that initially I was looking at it through I want to hear Late Registration lens, or I want to hear Gold Digger, or I want to hear Stronger,
Hmm.
and I want to know what the narrative is. I want to keep to the narrative. And it was the same thing. I like one of my, if not my favorite band, Radiohead. After fucking OK Computer, I was like, what the fuck is this? When Kid A came out, and one of my friends was just, and when I was saying, talking about 808s and how, I'm like, I'm lukewarm on it. He's like, man, you were lukewarm on the Radiohead shit, and then you just got it all of a sudden because it's like you just looked at it differently, and the whole thing made sense. And I think that's a lot
Yeah.
of what is, it is going on here, because now it's one of these records, one of these hindsight is 2020 records, because this was well reviewed by critics, but it's almost like one of those
Hmm.
critic and fan schisms in terms of what it is. So very few people have actually pulled this off. The fact that he did that is, this is another thing that if people try to argue that he is not one of the most important musicians, definitely of the last 30 years, I would completely disagree.
Yeah, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. So I think like there was like a lot of people like you at the time, and I think like a lot of Kanye's core fan base, because he had like longly for a long time he touted Good Ass Job being his like culmination to the College Dropout Late Registration and Graduation series. So instead of Good Ass Job, which people were expecting again at this time, he gave 808's and Heartbreaks. So I think a lot of his core hip hop fan base were kind of like shocked and like didn't understand the album. But yeah, this album I think maybe is aged the best out of all of Kanye's albums to me. And not that it's like necessarily like everyone's favorite or whatever, but I think it has aged super well and time has been very kind to it.
It's interesting
Yeah.
because oh, sorry, continue, Lance.
What I find really interesting about it is I think like what you said about how it well, you didn't say alienate, but it's almost like it alienated a lot of his like hip hop fans, right? So it's like you have this like whole generation of like hip hop heads, like hip hop kids that kind of like passed on this album. But then when this album came out, there was a whole generation of younger kids, I feel like, that they heard this album, and this was like their first Kanye album. Like this was their first new Kanye album. Like this was on the radio when they're at like a formative age. So, and you can see that in that generation of people that were maybe, late teens at the time when this album came out. Fast forward to now, look at all those people now. They're the ones that are making music, and you can just see how, like the DNA on like a lot of hip hop now like you can see that imprint of 808's and Heartbreak on like a lot of like the newer class of hip hop that's coming out now.
I feel like if he does good ass music, then Graduation is just a title, because it's just a continuation of what he's doing. So the idea of graduating to something else, this makes sense. He's literally graduating to a whole other like period of experimentation, but also growth in the pop lexicon, which you always talk about moving forward with this, is because it's now it's looking at it from a pop perspective. And I think that, I mean, this record is clearly his most influential record. To me, that's not particularly up for debate, because, I mean, and we're going to get more into the music and stuff as we're moving along, but like this is the one when we talked last episode about how if he doesn't live, then the pop music probably sounds different than it is now. This is the record that really begins that and starts that.
Well, I think, yeah, you look at like Juice World or Little Uzi or Drake,
exactly,
or like a smattering of other artists like of lesser and higher profile, and like you could trace the DNA of this album like into their, like it's a clear path, a clear line. And I think too at the time when this album came out and like people had maybe started to enjoy it a bit more, they looked at this album as an outlier and a departure. And I think that was the way that I framed this album too. It was, he had his 3 albums, then he had this album somewhere else in a different category, and then he was going to go back to doing almost like his normal music. And I think like at the time that my Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy came out, it almost seemed like that, because that was a bit more in line with his first 3 albums. But I think looking back now, after having all of his albums to at this point to look back at, you can see where this album fits in, and it is part of a clear and concise like trajectory.
Standout tracks, guys. Standout tracks.
Wait, I just had a quick question for Coburn, actually.
Sure, throw it out there.
When this album came out, like, what was the reaction of like you and your friends? I'm sure were all like, deeply in like, into hip hop and whatever. What were all your friends kind of passing on it? Were you like, I'm sure you enjoyed it at the time, but like, would you say your friends did?
I would say like a portion of them did. I think like Kanye for a long time was like the leader in rap, and at this point, because he departed far from the sound, and this is also the time that Lil Wayne had been like kind of quietly taking everything over, who's also featured on the album. So Lil Wayne kind of became the go-to guy, and he was also very experimental, but in a different way than Kanye was. So I think Kanye had left the hip hop sphere a bit, and even though he was still like very influential in it, he wasn't seen as like a rapper's rapper at that point, because he transcended and he was doing so much more.
Okay,
cool. I appreciate that.
Okay, can we stand out tracks? We can move to it. I don't want to. All these good ideas are coming out. I don't want to interrupt. So for me, with my standout track on this is Love Lockdown. I love that track. It is so good. It's so good. So simplistic. Like the melody that comes in with the piano. Yeah, it's. I mean, you wrote this in 5 minutes. So the beat, of course, it's. You know what I mean? Like, it's just he's on the 808 doing little pitch bends. He's fucking. It's really good, and just the simple melody comes in, and like when people are like, well, what's he doing on this record, this song is what I would show them, because heavily simple beats on the 808 coming in, tribal drums, atmospheric production technique to really kind of stretch everything out, add an ethereal nature to it, and then doubling down on melody, which this is the thing he talks about in this, and that's the really big key of that pop music coming in, because melody it's the name of the game, and he understands that. I think he understands that in the way a lot of other hip hop producers maybe don't understand that, and he's able to kind of like harness it and work it to his advantage.
I think too, like you said, like with melody, like with Love Lockdown, like this is the beginning too of melody kind of surpassing everything else in hip hop. So like the way that this album infused melody was like it'd been done before, but this from him where he was out of the charts doing it, like just changed the game so much. So I'd say Love Lockdown for sure is one of mine. I'd say Streetlights. I think that song's like so beautiful. Like you have the Daniel
fantastic.
Caesar cover of it too. And I think for a lot of people, they hadn't really heard that song. I think I see all the time online, people are like, oh, what is this song? Like they've never heard it because it didn't really catch on the same way. And it's like a bit of a deep cut. For me, my personal favorite might be Amazing on this album. I love like,
dude, the Jeezy verse is
Yeah.
stupid. It's
really
so good.
It's one of his best.
Yeah, absolutely. His cadence in that and just like the wordplay. Oh, I love Jeezy on Amazing. I would say my favorite though is probably Welcome to Heartbreak. I'm a sucker for fucking Cudi, and like that song just to like I mean it doesn't kick off the album, but it's it's fucking right at the opening. And like I don't know, just Cudi on it, the beat, everything, like the melody again, like we're talking about. That's definitely the one that I think is the one that's the one when I was listening to the album, like I was just like, how could people shit on this album? Like this song is fucking amazing, and then it just maintain that quality from there.
Like for me, that is, that's something, a sound with the high, the that that high pitch, like moving to falsetto, like it's something that I feel you would hear on like late 80s Prince, like post Sign of the Times, and it's early 90s Prince, pre switching to a symbol because of Warner Brothers fascism. I really like this. For me is the emotional touchstone with
it sets up the record. I feel like.
with Coldest Winter, like this and that. Like if I were like, yo, we got to show where he's at in terms of celebrity and how he feels about celebrity, and this idea of guys are, and he said there was this interview, he was talking to Sway from MTV, and Sway was trying to tell him stuff about his house and his kids. Pardon me. Yeah, did he have the answers? Yo, that's one of my favorite ones. If you haven't seen Kanye West get at Sway over sneakers, then you must. You just broke my train of thought because that interview was so
I'm
hilarious.
so sorry.
It's so good. No, but Sway was showing him pictures of like his family and stuff, and he's like, man, I got nothing to show you. That's that.
Show pictures of his crib.
Yeah, what I'm gonna do? Show you pictures of my car and shit, and that kind of. This is why I.
It's
feel
like the thesis. It's like the thesis statement of the album.
Yeah,
I feel like.
No. I
like
think,
literally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's called Welcome to Heartbreak. Like, just look at the title. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's spot on.
So, who do you think like influenced this album the most? Like, because I think he's mentioned like Phil Collins. I think like Boy George is another influence on this album.
Yeah, Phil Collins for the drums, for those like crunchy, like those like dead drums. I know that he. I don't know who else.
Well, the Phil Collins thing is interesting because as soon as you said Phil Collins, I'm like, it's The Air of the Night. In my head is like, boom, it's The Air of the Night.
That like
it makes sense because of like just the way the decay is on it, and then it's like the drums are decayed, but then there's this, but it's got that, it's got a very
reverberation. Kind of.
It's like, but I'm trying to describe like the reverb. It's like that you would hear in a room. Like because when you're going on, because they have like, I mean, when you start breaking down digital reverb, it's like they set it almost like basically on like, is it a fucking hall, is it a room sounding, like what is the space in which it's filling, and it's just it's fantastic and it makes complete sense going through it.
No, I genuinely really fucking like this album. Like I would consider 808's one of my tops, like of all time, not even just of Kanye. Like I really, really fucking love this album.
I feel like we gotta also like shout out T-Pain too, because T-Pain was a huge influence on this album.
Yeah,
and like, Kanye had him flown out to Hawaii to record the album, and I believe he like kind of wanted to interpret like T-Pain's first album, rapper turned singer, and he wanted to kind of infuse that. Obviously, Kanye kind of like maximizing the sounds on there and using the auto-tune kind of like to sonically shape the album too. I think it was a nice touch, like a new thing for Kanye. And
well, see, this is the thing I just didn't get. It was because I wasn't like huge on T-Pain, and then as soon as he starts working with Kanye West, I'm like, oh, T-Pain just needed to work with Kanye West.
Yeah.
T-Pain's an insane singer. Like
he's very good. Yeah, he is.
He doesn't use that's what you have to realize about T-Pain. Like, he's not using auto-tune to like fix his voice. He's using it for the aesthetic. You know what I mean? He's using it as an artifice.
I think this is the number one thing you have to realize. It's like when Kanye West is like, "Hey, it auto tunes. It tunes when I start. When my voice goes out of tune. To maintain the proper fucking pitch." And he's just like, but it kind of emphasizes the mistakes. But that's good.
Exactly.
And that's the part I didn't get. Sorry, continue.
No, that I was just agreeing with you.
That was the that was the point. Yes.
Oh, I remembered what I wanted to say though. By the way,
go for it.
It was when you hit that Kid Cudi ooh, you actually hit that really nicely. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you. I was falsetto until puberty.
Now you're castrato.
Now, yes, that's it. I mean, this kind of leads into like what we feel. Like, what do you feel is the biggest change from his overall sound from the previous records? You know what I mean? Like, I really like this idea of the singing as a means of expression that he talks about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's honestly the biggest. I mean, he's used auto-tune all the way through. Like, it's been on the other records and shit. But like the almost exclude. Like, was there anything that he did without auto-tune? Maybe like Pinocchio Story, but even that had auto-tune. Anyway, I'd say that's probably the biggest kind of divergence from the last album is like leaning heavily on auto-tune, and whether you like it or not, I mean, it's different from his other stuff.
Yeah, I think like auto-tune on this is like almost like an instrument. It's almost like it blankets the whole album and it gives it a cohesiveness, and it is such like a departure from like the way like someone else might use auto-tune, and obviously like the way T-Pain did it as like a career, but like this is like kind of just a bubble that Kanye has like wrapped this album in, and it kind of insulates the album in a certain way, and I think that's why people think of it as an outlier. Yeah, just because it insulates the album and it kind of contains it off.
Yeah, and also, I mean, he's done away with the I mean, at least for put him on pause of like this, like the soul samples. I think I think you called them chipmunk soul samples last time. I thought that was funny, but yeah, like there's none of those like soul sample. Well, not so much.
No, it's not based on the sample like his.
Yeah,
I mean, like his. I mean, like he did it down and dirty before when he first started his career. He was like taking the samples, chopping them up, doing things with them within a hip hop framework that were fucking really good and really kind of out there. But that's a big part of the tearing the sound down. It's the less emphasis on samples, more emphasis on keys. Like dipping back into analog instruments from the 80s that from the roots of hip hop. Melody is the biggest one, and again, it's the more of the consciously trying to make a pop record.
I think the only soul sample I can think of is on Bad News. He samples Nina Simone, but I think the rest of it's like he has like a composer sampled on one of the other songs, and like just like very like eclectic samples that like kind of. I think this album has like a really deep tie into Yeezus that would come after it in a way.
It totally does. It is
for sure.
There's really like we're gonna get into Dark Twisted Fantasy, but like Dark Twisted Fantasy is like taking this record and the early part of his career and smashing them together. Yeah, and like it's like combining those elements to make this thing, and then he's gonna take it down again.
Yeah, I also think one thing that we might not have mentioned about this album is I feel like this album, for like lack of a better term, but like kind of popularized like emo hip hop, where it's like it made it a little bit more okay to like talk about your feelings in a song in hip hop. I'm not saying that never existed before, but I think that definitely this kind of made it okay, like made it more popular to be really open about your emotions, at least. I mean, if you want to call this a hip hop album, but on like a hip hop album type situation.
I want to talk more about the Kid Cudi collaboration. How do you think that helped mold what he's trying to do here?
Yeah, quick question. Was this was before Kid Named Cudi, right? The mixtape?
I think this is after the mixtape, but before End of the Day, or his first album, Man on the Moon.
Okay.
So this is after the mixtape. I think Kanye had picked Kid Cudi up
because of that.
Yeah, because of that. So Cudi has I think 4 writing credits on this album. So I think just the way that Kanye can kind of borrow and inhabit other artists' sounds and kind of use them and build upon them is like obviously super unique to him, but it's definitely very apparent on this album because this is also the introduction of Mr. Hudson, who was on tour with Kanye, I think the year before on the Glow in the Dark tour. Like he was opening up in Europe. So like Mr. Hudson had a profound impact on this album. Obviously T-Pain and then Kid Cudi, I think would be, and then Jeff Basker kind of goes without saying, but like kind of the 4 kind of worlds that like Kanye kind of pulled into his world. And I think Cudi's sound with like Plain Pat and Emil and his producers, it articulated really well into 808's and Heartbreak. And Cudi is also like a pioneer of the kind of the emo, if you want to call it emo rap sound that kind of would come after it. So yeah, like as much as like Kanye's old for the legacy, yeah, like I think you have to put Cudi up there too on the pantheon.
Yeah.
Yo, and those oohs can hit me with one, Kyle.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
They're so fucking soothing. Sorry, just quickly, I looked it up. Actually, 808's came out in November, and then Kid Named Cudi came out in July of 2008.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was actually just curious about that. So what was Cudi doing before Kid Named Cudi? Just like was there any other mixtapes?
I can't remember if he had any other mixtapes out. I remember him being around like on some on some of the 10 Deep mixtapes that they were putting out back in the day. Like I know he was around in New York.
Do you know what's the one Coburn with Can I Be on it? The one that samples the fucking LCD Sound System song?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I thought that was on the first one that he did.
Yeah, you might be right.
Because that song is banging. I used to listen to that over and over again. Because I'm like, dude, this just makes me want to fucking pitch stuff and punch people. It's really good. Also, like you see this when on this record hugely on like what is the through line to Kids See Coasts? Like this record is huge on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like it makes sense. It's like they kind of understood that sound they were going to build together, and all their collaborations have kind of been just them working on that, developing that, moving towards what they what they both mutually wanted to achieve. I wanted to talk about like what we felt the overall impact of this album was on the on pop music in general. So like how do you guys think it's changed things?
Oh, well, like obviously I think like Drake's whole kind of sound, his like gloomy sound that him and 40 built. Like 40 like talks about building it off of Say You Will. So I think that is a huge like influence on like obviously where Drake is at today and the way music kind of resonated. And like you said, the kind of emo rap or emo kind of sounds, like you have another Phil Collins kind of inspiration in or sampling of in Juice WRLD's single that was like completely huge, and Juice WRLD talks about 808's being a huge influence on him.
Yeah, and if you were to try to pull those records back, like, what does the last 5 years look like?
Yeah, like I don't know what, and Travis Scott too. I think like he talks about skipping over his first 3 albums, and this was the album that he latched onto. And you can hear it all throughout Travis's music, obviously, and he's also another big Kid Cudi fan. And the way he collaborates with Kid Cudi is like eerily similar to the way that Kanye and Cudi work together.
That's actually really true. Good point.
Yeah, like as I was saying before, like I mean, this is I'm sure like just a huge amount of people's like first Kanye album. And like I feel like the whole, like for lack of a better term, like the SoundCloud rapper genre, I feel like that almost doesn't exist without this album. You can just see it so clearly, like the line so clearly to this album, the way that all those kind of tracks are produced and stuff like that. Like I don't know, I just see a direct line to this album. And I mean, I'm not saying that wouldn't have existed in some other format, but I just think that like this was, like the DNA of that genre or subgenre, at least.
Well, I think the whole idea of taking a laptop and just making a rap album came from, the first three records and stuff. So like it completely makes sense that, and like I mean that's the backpack rap idea and the SoundCloud I can't even speak today. SoundCloud rappers, it's like they're just people with a MIDI controller, a laptop, and just ideas. And
Yeah.
that's what Kanye West travels around with to this day, just so he can pump stuff out. And that's the big thing I think people like Travis Scott get, because Travis Scott, I mean, he's forward, like he's pretty forward thinking in terms of marketing, in terms of the sound he wants to make, in terms of crafting a stage show. This is obviously taken directly from that, but it's like it's a whole bunch of there's all these millennial rappers who have just taken this record. And so my
Yeah.
thoughts are, like, if you're listing most influential records of all time, I think you actually have to talk about this one, because it completely, I mean, look at Drake. Like, what does, like, think about Drake and like Take Care and stuff. Like, you start seeing, it's almost like if you removed a primate from our evolutionary ladder. You know what I mean? Like, if you tried to, or like if you tried to take like something out of our DNA or out of our evolution, or Australopithecus, and all
It
of a
wouldn't
sudden
be the same.
it's like, what the fuck would we be? Would we have flippers?
Yeah.
Would it even be good? Would it be, you know what I mean? Like, I think
Don't be distant flippers.
yeah, no, I'm just fucking trying to do stuff with, like, you know what I mean? Like, Kanye West is one of the people who is in that chain of things that have created the music culture.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many. I don't think there's another album in his catalog that's more imitated than this album, and not like imitated in a bad way, but just like that you can draw like direct parallels to where the sounds have come from, or like the thoughts kind of have come from. Like, as influential and as great as all of his other work is, I think this, looking back, might like surpass all his other works.
Yeah, and I think that this is where you start looking at, if we're looking at pop music last 30 years, Prince and Michael Jackson, to me, are the only ones who are really looming larger. Because, I mean, they have the two of the biggest records ever put out, especially with, Michael Jackson and Thriller. Like, Thriller is, I mean, we can't, like, especially as individuals who were, like, when it came out, I mean, none of us were alive. I think it came out in 83. I was maybe one. I was maybe just born when it came out. So none of us can really truly understand, like, the world impact of, and, the cultural impact of Thriller coming out, or Purple Rain coming out, or Sign of the Times coming out. And I think he's the only one who's really put out records that are of that caliber, or of that pop music importance. Is that too much to say?
Because, like,
no, I would 100% agree.
Like, Michael Jackson even like said, I remember there was an interview with his daughter coming out saying that like he loved 808's and Heartbreaks, and that was his like.
He told him, yeah, fucking Michael Jackson was the one that told him to like sing on 808's and Heartbreak. He's like, no, like, go for it, man, like, sing.
So I think like once you get blessing from Michael Jackson, like that puts you automatically in that pop stratosphere, like,
for sure.
Down, right?
Yeah,
like,
I really can't think of anybody. Like, I'm trying to think of people whose careers over the last 30 years have like really hit those heights. Like, I can't, honestly, I really don't have an answer for that question. I really think that you're looking at those three artists, to be honest with you.
I was actually having a conversation a little while ago with some friends who are, very musically savvy, but they're not fans of Kanye West that much. Like, so I was talking to them about how, Kanye West is, in my opinion, the Michael Jackson of our times. And they laughed at me, and they laughed and they laughed. And I was like, no, like, I am 100% serious. And like, they just did not get it. So I appreciate the validation. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but also you contextualize it into our time. Like, even if, listen, no one's put out Thriller. No one has. Like, if you're looking at that records of that size, it's Purple Rain, it's Sergeant Pepper's, it's, I'm like, no, like, it's, I'm trying to, you know what I mean? You're looking at maybe fucking Exile on Main Street. You're looking at some of the greatest records of all time. And
Yeah, for sure.
I think that we are at a point where we have enough historical distance now that okay, you can't really at some point you can't deny facts, right? And I know it sounds like we're buttering Kanye. I mean, Kanye West's not even my favorite rapper, right? It's just like if we're trying to be as objective, I love him, but you're trying to be as objective as possible. I mean, we're gonna get to the stuff we don't like. I think mostly in the next episode, but this, but yeah, no, I really, I like for me, if I'm trying to be honest with all the metrics that you're putting together, like what is where the sounds are coming from, just like like video quality. Got like he's getting Spike Jones out there. He's gonna Hype Williams work with the best, and yeah, man, I'm sorry. Like I mean. I'm still trying to peruse records for influence. I mean, Paul's Boutique is what you're dipping for influence, you know, because like that, like it's those records.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to just before we move on to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, the Fame, you know, the Fame Kills tour. This whole thing with Lady Gaga. This I think certifiably would have been one of the biggest tours of all time. Because she's super good too. I'm not a big fan of her stuff, but I think that's more of an aesthetic, you know, like an oral.
She's talented as fuck.
Exactly, she's talented as fuck, and she's one of the people who understands the Matrix as well. Who kind of gets the rules and knows how to play with them and how to like deal and how to succeed in it. And also, it also helps that I mean her voice is so on point. When she sang the national anthem at the Super Bowl, I was just like, okay, we're talking like since Whitney level of good. But the whole Taylor Swift thing kind of kills, or they believe kills it. Like, what is our thoughts on that?
I mean, I would say so because like from like what it was like a management issue they said, but like that tour would have been huge. Like Jeff Basker was also involved with that tour, and he would later kind of go on to work with Lady Gaga and be her creative director for her like next set of tours. But when was the VMAs? It was in like
2009 or something like that.
Yeah, September 13th, 2009. So 808's is about a year old at that point, and I guess that would have been the tour to support it. And I just can't imagine what the stage production would have been like on that tour. Like Lady Gaga and Kanye West, like it must have been.
So it didn't happen?
No, it never happened.
So what happened? I didn't know about this.
The Taylor Swift VMA thing.
Oh, yeah. This was backlash from that?
Well, this is what we're kind of discussing. I'm like, this is like people have mused on this, that this is part of it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. The Taylor Swift incident happened in September, maybe like mid-September of 2009, and the tickets went on sale, I believe, the week after or the same week.
Ooh.
And then they canceled it like right after.
Jeez.
I mean, it's Beastie Boys' rage, if not higher level of.
Oh,
getting canceled.
What was that album called? The Beastie Boys and Rage Tour, and at the drive-in too. What was it called?
Oh yeah. So like, think about that fucking tour at the drive-in, Rage Against the Machine and fucking Beastie Boys. But then you have Lady Gaga and Kanye West. I mean, like, this is one of those things. This is one of those I find with Kanye West, as with any of these big things, you know, these big artists, there's always this what if mythology kicking around. You know, you see guys like Jimi Hendrix and how he was chilling with Miles Davis, and everyone's like, well, what if that happened? What if this happened? What if they played together? They talked about jamming, and I'm very much into the pop music legends and mythology, and I can't even fathom what the stage show would be because it's just, I can't, because you're collaborating on it. You're probably going to end up working together, and you know, like, or singing together on stage. Like, it's ridiculous. And as you said, Coburn, like, this is the support for that album, so kind of don't get it.
Yeah, like it must have been over that incident, because like the amount of money they would have raked in. I think even if one of the lawyers or someone was talking about it, or sorry, a radio station had basically said that like kind of white America or like the world wouldn't forgive Kanye. But I think even for just the press and like the negative press that kind of would have come off of it, like people would have still bought tickets just to see you, or maybe like yelled at Kanye kind of thing. I think one question I want to ask you guys is like, where do you think Kanye, what was Kanye's image at this time? Like, what did people think of Kanye at this time before the Taylor Swift incident?
I think Obama, before the Taylor Swift incident, before the incident, I feel like people thought he was kind of like a megalomaniac. I guess a bit of a douche, for lack of a better word.
So Coburn, just so we understand the situation, could you tell us about the whole Taylor Swift kerfuffle?
So it's September of 2009. The MTV VMAs, which are the Video Music Awards. Not that MTV. I don't know if was MTV even playing videos at this point. It's to be determined.
I think they had like shows like TRL and shit.
I think by this point they were almost running like 20 straight hours of The Real World.
Yeah, which is the greatest reality show of all time. So I
like Yo Mama.
Yeah,
for like the other 4 hours.
Yeah.
Shout out to Yo Mama.
Yeah, R.I.P. So at this time, it's the 2009. 808's has been out for about a year. I believe there'd been no tour for it at that point, just maybe some shows and some festivals. It's a VMAs. Kanye shows up with Amber Rose and a bottle of Hennessy.
Let's be real here. The Hennessy was culpable in this.
Yeah,
100%.
A nearly like a half empty bottle of Hennessy on the red carpet in New York. And this is like the MTV VMAs, which for some reason MTV has like 4 award shows a year. These things are mostly like kind of like record label, like
it's a circle jerk.
Yeah, talent shows maybe. This is our new artist.
At this point, it's unnecessary clout.
Yeah, like no one really cares or remembers any of these shows or performances because they happen like 3 times a year. But Taylor Swift gets up on stage and she's won an award for her song. I don't know what song or video it was at this time.
It was best video. I don't remember which one. Maybe Shake It Off? No, this is before that. This is before that.
Yeah. This is like pre Shake It Off.
Yeah.
So she is getting out on stage to accept her award for best video by a female artist, and none other than Kanye himself gets up and runs on stage, and in the middle of her impassioned speech for winning and her holding the award there, comes out, completely sideswipes her. And this is not his first time doing this. Like we said, he'd done this before to Justice and the European Music Awards. So this is not a new Kanye.
Not train.
No. So he says, and this is a famous Kanye quote at this point now, I'm going to let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time. And kind of like does a little shrug and leaves the mic and gets off stage. Cut to the whole audience who's sitting there like.
Cut to Beyonce.
Yeah, Beyonce. He's just like, what are you doing?
God. Yeah.
Why did you involve me in this? And like, this is like, I don't know if in another world if this is a big deal, but like it is. It's like becomes the biggest deal in music and probably the only thing that anyone's going to remember about that night in 2009.
No one.
I feel like if that. Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel like if that happened now though, that would be like a headline for like 2 days, and then everybody would have forgotten about it. I feel like the music's like, I mean, like aside from all the events obviously that are happening in the world right now, I'm talking about 3-4 months ago, if this happened, it would have been like news for a couple days, and then I feel like it would have quickly been forgotten about.
Yeah, music's like wrestling now. They have all this kind of shit happening all the time. Like people are fucking interrupting. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's everything's PR, everything's pageantry. Like it's
What? That's also another interesting thing about this is a lot of people. I don't know if they still do to this day, but like there was a lot of like speculation that this was like a promotional stunt, especially because like the whole VMAs is really a promotional stunt at this point. They had like the same PR agent between them. People had like kind of like done all this, like, oh, they had this person in common, this agent in common, or whatever. So like this was like coordinated PR stunt, like hype up Taylor Swift and also like give Kanye like infamy.
Coburn,
I don't know about that.
Coburn, I got a question here. I think that you're only qualified to answer. As a black man, what would the implications of having the first black president call you a jackass have? Like, was that something your family would be embarrassed about?
I mean, I think that's something that Kanye will never live down, and I think it's it's why Kanye jumped on the Trump wagon as soon as he could, because he was like, man, the last guy called me a jackass. Like, like I'm gonna get in good with the new president, and like we're gonna be like friends. Or wear a stupid hat or whatever.
That's what.
Well, did you see his comments? Did you see his comments now about the whole thing? He's like, you don't get a meeting unless you wear the hat. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying.
Yeah, I don't know, but
that's what it was.
Getting it's funny because I guess looking back at it now, like Kanye has famously interacted very closely with the last 3 American sitting presidents. And like, what other artists can you say has done that or like has like an impact on them?
That's a good point, dude. I never thought of it that way.
He was just beef. Yeah, this is the listen, because like obviously there was all this bullshit with censorship in the late 80s and early 90s with hip hop and all that kind of stuff. But this guy, like literally, he's being full on mentioned in tweets and in conferences and in discussions with presidents of the United States.
Thanks, Kanye. Very cool. Fucking the Trump tweet.
Yeah. Maybe this is why he just wanted to be good. Yeah, because like two straight presidents were just like, okay, I can't deal with Kanye West. And these are radically different presidents. And then he's just like, I got to get good with one. And he just chose Trump, which is, I mean, he's great at choosing collaborators, but like political entities to graduate to, I mean, not his bag.
I mean, Kanye and Trump like have a lot in common. They're both like, very loud, very like kind of abrasive personalities. Like narcissists to a degree, like flaunt wealth in a certain way. Like there's a lot in line, and like if Trump was a Democrat and like he wasn't like the biggest asshole in the world and like creating.
Well, Trump was a Democrat until what, like 10 years ago or whatever.
Democratic donor for his entire life almost.
Yeah.
So like like if the tables were turned and he ran as a Democrat president and like wasn't like continuing such like abhorrent policies, like there might be a different like world there, like. And like Kanye might have still been close because Trump was like very involved in the hip hop world. Like people were always quoting him, and like he was kind of involved with the wrestling world too. So
the wrestling is the best. Like
he's a WWE Hall of Fame only president. Just saying.
Yeah, like can you see Obama trying to do that? Like, come on.
I could see Dennis Rodman doing that, and
he's got the best DDT and rebounding. He's fucking consistent.